Okay, guys, so please don't forget to turn your cameras. Please, it's really important that you guys do that. Okay, so today we're going to be working on the speaking section as well. So we have already gone through question or task 2, 3, and today we're going to be looking at task 4. So actually, this is the last task that you guys are going to be finding in the speaking section. So after this, you're done with the speaking. Now, this task here is also an integrated task, which means that you gotta talk about something else, that's not about you. So you're just gonna act like a reporter that's gonna be reporting something. In this case, it'll be just a listening part, so you won't have to read anything anymore. But it's still gonna be an academic question as well. So you will see some academic content. It will be on the not so hard sciences, I would say. So you will see what I mean in a couple of minutes. So basically for this task, what you guys will do is first you will listen to a lecture. So you guys remember what a lecture is, right? Do you? So a lecture is pretty much a college class in which the professor is explaining a topic. So that's a lecture. So you will be listening to that explanation of a topic, of an academic topic, and then you will get 30 seconds to prepare your response, 30 seconds to prepare, and 60 seconds to speak. So it's actually the same amount of time that you guys had for task 2 and 3. So it's gonna be the same. The question is always the same. Using the points and examples from the lecture, explain, and whatever the main topic of the lecture is. So that's it regarding the structure of this task. Any questions so far? So far, so good. Is it all clear here? So you get to listen to the lecture, then you get 30 seconds to prepare your response, and 60 seconds in which you can deliver your response. Now, regarding the topics that you will be seeing in this question, these are pretty much going to be the same that you guys had in task 3. So if you remember that, then we're all good. Remember that you could have psychology, biology, or business topics. Those are the most common fields in which the lectures will be. But of course, there are some other possibilities which are, even though they're not that common, there's that, So if it's psychology, again, it's probably going to be on how our mind works, how we behave, how we experience certain emotions, certain things. If it's biology, it'll probably be on animals and plants. And if it's business, it'll be on strategies or marketing strategies, right? Or advertising techniques. So that's it. I'm not going through these, in such in that way, because we have already seen it for task 3 and it's the same. So psychology, biology, or business. Any questions now? Okay. Now here's when it gets different. So this is mainly what differentiates task 3 from task 4, and that's the structure of the lecture. So if you guys remember, in the previous task, the first thing that you needed to do was read something, right? A short passage. So you needed to look at the title, that was the topic, and then find a definition. And then in the lecture, you got the examples, right? The real world examples of this concept. So it's gonna be similar to that, but you don't have the reading part anymore. So what does that mean? So basically that means that at the beginning of the lecture, you will have a short introduction where the professor is gonna be introducing the topic, the main idea of the lecture. So the professor could be something like, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about pollution. Let's say that's an example, okay? Let's say the topic of your lecture is pollution. Now, sometimes you will have a probably short definition of the topic, something like, so pollution, as you guys may know, is this and this and that, and it happens when this phenomenon happens, I don't know. So sometimes you will have all that in the introduction, but I have to say this, guys, that I don't think that's important. I mean, it's not that important. So you can take some notes if you want from that part of the lecture. But as I'm saying, I don't think you should be spending too much time of your response in that. So I wouldn't focus too much on catching that information. The only thing that I would worry about is understanding what the main topic is, which is probably going to be in the question as well. So you don't have to worry that much. Now, the next thing, that's what's important. The professor will always, no matter what, break down the topic into two subtopics. So you will always have two subtopics in this lecture. It's not like in question 3 where you could have 2 examples or 1. So now in this case, you will always have 2, so you know what to expect. And that's the most important part of the lecture. So I don't know what that's going to be, okay? It could be a lot of things. So it could be, if we're talking about pollution, maybe you got 2 effects of pollution or 2 causes of pollution, or if maybe 2 theories on how to solve pollution, or maybe 2 examples of pollution or 2 types of pollution. So I don't know what relationship your subtopics can have with the topic, but it will always be 2. Okay, so that's what I know. There are some types of, relationships that you could find, as I was mentioning. It could be cause and effect, effect and cause, types of pollution. It could be definitions of the word, maybe. You got 2 different definitions or 2 examples. So there are many things. And that's what you want to pay attention to. Another thing I can say is that each subtopic will have a specific name. So you got a term here, you got a concept. So remember how in task 3, I always said, read the title, because that's the name of the concept, that's the key term. So in this case, you will have 2 key terms, and those will be the subtopics. So you're not going to be reading them, but you're going to be listening to them. So pay attention to those terms. So maybe if it's 2 types of pollution, you got something like, okay, so water contamination. So that's a term that you need to remember. And the second one could be air pollution. I don't know. So remember, try to catch those terms. And the next thing that you guys will have is some examples or some more specific details about this. So for instance, if you got water contamination, then maybe you got a more specific example. Maybe you got the name of a river in Italy, or you got the name of a lake, maybe. Or if it's air pollution, maybe you got some specific gases or some specific pollutants. I don't know. Okay, so but it always goes that way. You got the introduction to the topic, and then the professor breaks down that topic into 2 subtopics and some examples as well. So is that okay? I know that it might be a bit confusing, but I'm sure you guys get the hang of it once we get to the example and you listen to a sample task. But is it okay so far? Questions? Okay. So in order to identify the topic, which is going to be given at the introduction, I would say that the one mistake that people tend to do in this task is they spend too much time talking about that introduction. So they're going to try to explain what the topic was about in like 30 seconds. And that's definitely not the idea. That's not the goal. So one thing you guys can do to help you out there, to help you summarize the whole idea, is look at the question, because it's probably going to contain some important summary of the whole thing. So always try to read the question. So don't let that go. Some tips I could give you in your response. You gotta first thing, remember that you're reporting what the professor's saying. So these are not your ideas. You need to use reporting verbs like the professor states that pollution is caused by this, or according to the lecture, this happens. Okay, so you gotta give them credit. Your reporting verbs need to be in the simple present. So try not to say the lecture was about, or the lecture said, or the professor stated. No, you try to use the simple present. Pay attention to transitions, like first, on the other hand, second, as a result. Those kind of things will give you an idea of how the lecture is organized, and you can use transitions in your response as well. Remember that they're going to be specifically looking for those words, so the more you have them, the better your score could be. I don't know, but probably a lot of people have struggled with time in this task because the lecture is sometimes 3 minutes long and you got to summarize the whole thing in 1 minute. So of course you're going to have to leave some things behind. You cannot include everything in your response. So that means that you need to prioritize your information. You got to make good summaries and only focus on what's relevant. I wouldn't focus too much on the details if I were you. Finally, even though you don't have that much time, I wouldn't try to hurry it or try to speak fast, because that's going to make things not so understandable for the listener, And also try to speak with enthusiasm, like mark pauses and, I don't know, control the tone of your voice. That always helps, and it makes your speaking more, more, nicer for the listener. Okay, guys. So I think that's it. Any questions before we look at the example? All right, then. So here we go. I'm going to play now the lecture, and you guys are going to be taking some notes. So get a piece of paper and pen. And remember, this is what I want you guys to take notes on. So first thing, you need to identify what the topic of the lecture is, the main topic. And most importantly, you need to make sure that you catch the subtopics. So you were going to have some terms here. So you need to find what those are. If you got a definition here as well, that's something I didn't mention. So remember how I was saying you were going to have some terms here? So besides that, you will probably have a definition as well. Something like water contamination. So that's when water is contaminated, blah, blah, blah. And the same here, okay? So if you got those, then also pay attention to that. And also the details or the examples, whatever you want to call them. Okay, guys, so make sure to take notes on that. Make sure to listen to the question as well. Here we go.
Listen to part of a lecture in a business class.
If a consumer has to choose between two products, what determines the choice? Assume that someone, a purchaser, is choosing between two products that cost the same, okay? If people have a choice between two identically priced products, which one will they choose? They choose the one they think is of higher quality, of course. But what does it mean for a product to be a high-quality product? Well, business analysts usually speak of two major factors of quality. One factor is reliability, and the other is what we call features. So reliability. What's reliability? Well, a product is reliable if it works the way we expect it to work, if it can go a reasonable amount of time without needing repairs. If a product, a car for example, doesn't work the way it should and needs repairs too soon, we say it's unreliable. So product reliability means basically the absence of defects or problems that you weren't expecting. It used to be that when people thought about product quality, they thought mainly about reliability. Today, it's different. People do still care about reliability, don't get me wrong. It's just that manufacturing standards are now so high that, we'll take cars for example, today. Today's cars are very reliable. So reliability is important, but it's not going to be the deciding factor. So if reliability isn't the deciding factor anymore, what is? Features. All those extras, the things a product has that aren't really necessary, but that make it easier to use or that make it cool. For example, new cars today are loaded with features like electric windows, sunroofs, air conditioning, stereos, and so forth. When people are comparing products today, they look at features because reliability is pretty much equal across the board. And that's why manufacturers include so many features in their products.
Using points and examples from the lecture, Explain the two major factors of product quality and how their role in consumer decision-making has changed. Listen.
Okay, guys. So, any thoughts? How was it? Okay, guys. So we're going to be trying to discuss what the lecture was about and what the elements of the lecture were. So first thing, can anyone tell me what the topic was? What was the lecture about?
Teacher, I can participate. The lecture was about the consumer class. Consumer class.
Was about, sorry, what?
Consumer class.
Consumer class. All right, what do you mean by consumer class?
I think it's the classification of consumer and how the consumer select the different products.
Okay, exactly. I got you now. So yeah, how the consumer chooses different products or selects different products. Okay. So I wrote that down. How consumers choose products. All right. So I like that you're keeping the word choice. And that's another thing, you know, when you got like business topics, it's important that you guys have some vocabulary, you know, so it's not the same saying how people choose things than saying how consumers choose products, right? So keep that in mind. It really helps to have some vocabulary there. And also to know what the words are, right? You know, because if the speaker starts using these words and you have no idea what they mean, you're gonna be lost. Okay, guys. So yeah, how consumers choose products. Anything else for the topic? Any other ideas? So now, what about the subtopics? Were you guys able to catch what those terms were here?
I think the subtopics were reliability and features.
Awesome, yes, reliability and features. There you go. So you see how they are very specific terms. So it is important that you guys mention that in your response. Reliability and features. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you a question now, and let's see if you guys know what I mean. So can anyone tell me now, how is these reliability and features related to how consumers choose their products? I mean, what does reliability have to do with this? Or what do the subtopics have to do with the topic in general? Yes, Ariel?
According to the lecture, these subtopics are the decisive factor when consumers have to choose between two identical products, especially when the price tag is very similar.
Okay, awesome. So yes, that's it. Those are the deciding factors that influence the consumer's choice, especially when the price is similar. So how do they choose when they have two products that cost around the same? So they usually look at these two factors. Great. So that's actually something that you also may want to consider mentioning in your response. And it can work also as a transition in your response. So you can say, so there are two, or according to the professor, there are two deciding factors. And then you can start right up. You know, first, reliability, second, features. So I like this word here, factors. You can have many things. You know what I was saying before, like it could be two definitions of quality, or two types of products, or two effects of consumers' choices. I don't know. So careful with that. Now, what about reliability and features? Does anybody know the meaning of reliability? So what's the definition that the professor gives for this one? What's reliability? Yes, Ariel?
According to the professor, rela, rela, I can pronounce it very well. Reliability is
Okay.
when a function functions as how it is expected. Is the absence of malfunctions.
Good. The absence of malfunctions. And yes, it's when a product works the way you expected, you know, or functions the way you expected. So. Okay, great. So yeah, reliability is when a product works the way you expected and it doesn't have any defects or malfunctions that you can that you have to worry about. Anything else here for reliability?
The professor mentions that even when reliability is a main factor when a customer is searching for a product, it isn't the deciding factor.
Okay, it's not the deciding factor. I think it used to be the deciding factor, but it's not anymore, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And why is that? Anybody remembers?
I think because the customers are searching for features more than reliability.
Okay, so yeah, that's true. Customers now care more about features. But why? How so?
Teacher, it could be that the reliability has become a common factor in products.
Yes, exactly. So reliability nowadays, I think, is like the same for all products. So every product is reliable. You know, it's usually not gonna have defects when you buy it. So since products tend to be reliable now, they have to look at something else, and that's features. So great, guys, that's true. Okay, because products. Okay, guys. So even though this is important information, I wouldn't like if I don't have that much time, I wouldn't worry too much about including this information in the response. Okay, remember, it's usually gonna be just the term and the definition. If you got more information, it's okay. If you think you're good with time and you look at the clock, you still have some time, you can include that information. Even at the end, you know, after you're done with features, you could say something like, also, it's important to mention that according to the professor, reliability is not the deciding factor anymore because products are reliable. So you can include it as an extra at the end, only if you have like more time. All right. Now, what about the example or the details? How does the professor illustrate this concept of reliability? What example does he give?
In both subtopics, the professor uses the car as an example.
Good, cars. How so? What about cars?
The professor said that reliability isn't a deciding factor because most car manufacturers they kind of fabrics the cars in the same way. There isn't something that there isn't like decisive. I'm gonna say feature, but I don't know if this is the correct word to say. But they use
Okay.
the same methods to fabric the cars.
So yeah, they basically they manufacture all cars in the same way. So yeah, but when is a car said to be reliable? Like when do we call a car reliable? What does a car have to do to be reliable? Any other information you guys have for the examples? Because I think this is true, but this is mostly illustrating this idea, that reliability is not the deciding factor anymore. But how do you explain this? That it needs to work the way that you expected. It doesn't have to have any defects. So I would also try to relate it to that concept. I would try to say, so a car is said to be reliable when you don't have to take it to the mechanics, because I think that's sort of what the professor mentioned. So I don't know. Just saying. But moving on to the second one, who can tell me what features are? What's features?
I think features are functionalities or functions that are not really necessary but add value to the product.
Yes, exactly. So features are all those extra characteristics that are not really necessary, but that of course add value to the product. So awesome, that's great. That's what features are. And what about the examples? What example have we got here?
Teacher, I don't know. Oh. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Irina.
Okay. I don't remember if this is an example, but the teachers say that the features makes a product more easier to use.
Great. That's not an example. That's part of the definition. It will be an example if it's like how you apply that into the real world. Of the example of a product, maybe like cars. But that's part of the definition. So what are features? Are characteristics that make the product easier to use. So great, that's true, yeah.
Teacher, other point could be that the features in the products are a surprise factors that excite the consumer.
All right, okay.
Such as electric windows and sound quality in cars.
Okay, so those are actually the examples. So the electric windows, that's when it gets specific, So features are this and this and that, such as, so that's the example. So electric windows, what else?
Sound quality.
Okay, other qualities. It's okay, I think the professor mentioned a couple more, but it's fine if you mention like 2 or 1 even. So I wouldn't worry that much, as long as you mention at least 1, then you're good. So that they know that you have gotten those examples. Okay, so anything else you guys want to add here to this outline? Okay, so let's talk about your response. How is that supposed to be? So in your response, you want to focus more on the subtopics. That's one thing that I want to be clear on. However, you still need an introduction. So at the beginning, you can try to say something like the lecture's about, which is quick and sweet and direct, so make it direct. The lecture's about, and then you tell me that topic, if you remember, the question usually has some good hints. I remember that the question was something like, using the examples and points from the lecture, explain the 2 factors that influence consumer decision making, I think. It was something like that. So you can say that in your response. You could say something like the lecture's about consumer decision making. And then you try to make that transition to move on to the 2 topics. And that's when you can use this information that you got here, 2 deciding factors. So you can say something like, to introducing the topic, the professor features 2 deciding factors. And then you say, to start, he talks about reliability, which is the absence of defects and when a product works the way it should. For instance, cars or car manufacturers I don't know, design cars in the same way, and they are all reliable nowadays. So that's the way that you can organize it, okay? You go with your intro at the beginning, which is the general idea. Then you can move on to how that's broken down into two subtopics, so two deciding factors. Then you start with the first one, the example, the second one, and the example. There's something that you guys can do. In case you don't have that much time, you can skip this part, okay? So this depends on how good you are with time. So as you go, as you practice, try to see whether you want to include this or not, because it's not that necessary. Instead of saying after introducing the topic, the professor features two deciding factors, you could add that here. You could say the lecture is about consumer decision making and the two deciding factors that influence this. So to start, the lecture describes. So it sounds good, it sounds fancy, and it gives it gives a bit of flow to your response, but it's not necessary. So in case you don't have that much time, you're constantly running out of time, then exclude this part, okay, remove it. But if not, then you can add that. I don't know, what can I say? Just make sure to use a transition whenever you see one in the template. So you can change it if you want. You can say, first of all, or to begin with, or you can say moving on, or on the other hand, or you can change this verb to explains, but just make sure to follow the structure, okay? So the lecture is about consumer decision making. After introducing the topic, the professor features two deciding factors that influence a consumer's decision. To start, the lecturer describes reliability, which is the definitions, the absence of defects when a product works the way it's expected to work. For instance, cars are now said to be reliable because they don't need to be taken to the mechanic so soon. Then the professor goes on to explain features, which are the extra characteristics that a product has that make them easier to use or make them cool. To illustrate, he mentions that car manufacturers are now competing to add these extra characteristics like electric windows and air conditioning or stereos and so forth, okay? So that's it. That's a good, you summarize the information and you follow that structure, okay? So is that okay, guys? Any questions about that? You're just following the same order. No questions? Shall we move on? Okay, so we're gonna do one more, but this time you guys are gonna do it. So I'm gonna play the lecture for you, take some notes, then I'll give you 30 seconds to prepare, and we'll try with a couple of people. So.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
When people are in difficult situations, sometimes they experience feelings of helplessness or psychological pain. So what do? They unconsciously use strategies called defense mechanisms to protect themselves psychologically from their painful emotions. Let's say a woman has a pet dog. She's had this dog for a long time, and he's kept her company and guarded her for years. But one day he runs away. This woman looks everywhere and asks other people if they've seen her dog. She just can't find him. Now, she feels helpless and sad because she misses her dog. So she'll unconsciously find ways to deal with her painful feelings. One defense mechanism she might use is fantasy. With fantasy, the woman uses her imagination. So instead of just feeling helpless and sad about her lost dog, she invents a happy story in her mind. She might imagine that a nice family found him and feeds him, and that he's really happy with them. She'll picture the dog playing, running around, having fun. Because of this fantasy, she doesn't have to feel sad about her dog running away. It's a fantasy. It's not real, but it keeps her pain away. Another defense mechanism she might use is what we call sublimation. Sublimation is different from fantasy because sublimation isn't about pretending. It's about turning negative emotions into something useful, practical. So the woman might start a dog training school. That way, by training dogs, perhaps she can help prevent other people's dogs from running away like hers did. In other words, with sublimation as a defense mechanism, the woman redirects her negative feelings about losing her dog into a positive, constructive activity.
In the lecture,
Okay, guys. So this time I'm going to read the question for you. So the question is, using points and examples from the talk, describe the two defense mechanisms mentioned by the professor. So, defense mechanisms. Now I'll give you all 30 seconds so that you can prepare your responses, and we'll be back. Okay, guys. So, is there anybody who would like to go first? Give it a try. Nope. Okay, so maybe we can go with, I don't know. Oscar, maybe? Do you mind going first?
Okay, teacher.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. The lecture is about helpness. It's about the defense mechanisms. To start, the lecture describes the one mechanism that is the imagination, the fantasy, how the people use this fantasy to recreate a new situation. The lectures give us one example, that is one person who loses her pet or his pet, and in that way he used that the fantasy to imagine that their pet is in another part, and the pet is happy. And the second explanation is about the negative emotions. That is the sublimation, I think. This is how we can give the situation another point, and is the way how we can create a new situation. That's all I can say.
Okay, that's great though. I think that's a really good start. So I think that you were summarizing your information and you were just keeping the relevant things in your response. And I like the fact that you avoided saying this because it did help you with time. Still though, you ran out of time, you went over a bit. So one thing that can help you guys with time is, in case you ever have, like in this task, you know, the example was the same one for the two of the subtopics. So when the example is the same, which is usually going to be the case when you got the psychology topics, you could mention it at the beginning. So you could say something, the lecture is about, and I like your intro too, Oscar. So the lecture is about two defense mechanisms. So that's quick, direct. You're not gonna waste time explaining what that is or how it works the way that the professor does, because the professor was like 30 seconds talking about it. So you don't care about that, you just say the lecture is about defense mechanisms. Now, if the example is the same, in order not to describe it all over again, you can just say something like, the professor uses the example of a woman who loses her dog as an example or to illustrate this concept. And then you say, to start, the lecture describes fantasy, which is imagining a happy situation to deal with pain. For instance, the woman, and then you don't have to explain it anymore. You just say, the woman will think that a nice family has found the dog. And then the same you can do here, So that's one thing to help you with time. Regarding grammar, what I could say is, and in general for you guys, careful with pronouns. You know how here, I'm not saying, it sounds a bit repetitive, but here, in order to avoid getting mixed up with the pronouns, if the professor is a she or a he, I'm just saying the lecturer, the professor, lecturer, right? So that I don't have to think about whether saying he or she. Now, sometimes, especially in psychology, you will have examples with real world stories like this one. And in this case, it was a woman, right? So you need to say she all the time. But you were saying he or he sometimes. So whenever you have that examples, write down in big letters in your notes something like she, so that you're going to be looking at it and you're going to say she all the time, okay? Because it's hard, I know. And what else? I think that's it, just maybe save some time and careful with the pronouns, but I think that's it. Then other than that, you got it.
Okay, teacher, thank you.
Okay, so who else? Who else would like to go? Perhaps Irina?
Yes, teacher.
Okay, then. So, off you go.
Okay. The lecture is about how people deal with pain. After introducing the topic, the professor features that there is two types of mechanisms. The first is the defense mechanisms, and the second is sublimation. To start, the lecture describes that the defense mechanisms is a way that you can protect yourself from the pain. She gives an example that, well, there is a woman that have like a dog, and then he runs away, and after that she looks for her dog, and well, she doesn't find her dog. At the end, well, he just like recreate an imaginary situation where the dog finds like a good family and he is happy with them. And then the professor goes on to explain the sublimation, that is a different way to affront to deal with the pain. And in this mechanism, you are not pretending like run away the pain. You are like finding a solution to deal with it. And he gives an example where the woman like train a lot of dogs, and so they help at the family with that problem.
Okay, great, Irina. So I think that was really cool as well. The only thing is time, Now there's one thing. In case you guys don't make it on time, that's fine as well, because they're gonna know that it was because of time. So if you get to say the first one and you don't have time for the second one, then it's not such a big of a deal. I think you still can get a pretty good score. It's not really about mentioning everything, but like the way that you're gonna do it, So it's okay, don't worry too much. still it's better that you try to practice and maybe make it a bit faster or summarize it more. So for instance, Irina, you were taking too much explaining the example, so like it's about a woman who has a dog, and then first she runs, I don't know, dog runs away and she's sad, and then she looks everywhere for the dog, but she doesn't find it. So don't focus on the details, and that's not the important part. What we need to know about the story is that a woman loses her dog and she needs to deal with the pain. So that's it. So what will she do? With fantasy, she will imagine a happy situation. And with sublimation, she will do something productive, like maybe start a training school. Okay, so you gotta focus on those key ideas and don't focus too much on the details. Even if you don't get to say like a nice family has found a dog, if you just say she imagines a happy situation, that's okay. And if here you just say she does a productive thing, and then you can briefly mention what it is, like starting a training school. So don't focus too much on the details, okay? Summarize more your information. Careful with grammar, the third person form of verbs, like she looks, she doesn't. With pronouns as well, like for the dog, even though it's kind of okay to say he, it's always better if you say it, like it will be like the grammar, like the correct grammar thing to say. Okay, and careful also with identifying these terms. So you said that the first one was defense mechanism, which was actually the question, right? Look at the question. Describe the two defense mechanisms. So one defense mechanism was fantasy and the other one was sublimation. So careful with that. You gotta pay attention and try to catch them. Okay. All right, any question, guys? Any questions? Would you maybe like to do another one, or anybody else wants to do this one?
Another one, maybe.
Okay, let's do another one. Okay. Okay, let's do a similar one so that you can apply all the things that we just talked about. Okay, so here we go.
To speak. Now listen to part of a talk in a psychology class.
Okay, ever thought about the things that happen to you and what's responsible for them? We psychologists have a term, locus of control. Locus of control refers to where people think control over their lives comes from, whether it comes from themselves or from somewhere else. People who think that control is in themselves are internals, and people who think it comes from somewhere else are externals. Let's say there are two people going for job interviews. One of them is an internal. She has an internal locus of control. Since she thinks that control comes from within herself, she'll believe that her success and her preparation are really her responsibility. So she's likely to really work on her interview skills ahead of time. Then, if she gets the job, she'll believe that it's because she's worked so hard. And if she doesn't get it, well, she'll probably be disappointed with herself and try to figure out how she can improve for the next time. Okay, and another job candidate is an external. He perceives other things, say, his interviewers, to have more influence. After all, it's their decision. It depends on what mood they're in and, luck. Now, with his external locus of control, he's not as hard on himself, so he's more likely to take risks. He might interview for a job that he's not completely qualified for, and if he gets it, he'll think he's really lucky, and because he believes external forces are in control, he might think it's because the interviewers were having a good day. And if he doesn't get it, he'll probably blame the interviewers, or bad luck, rather than look at himself and try to figure out what he could have done better.
Using points and examples from the talk, explain internal and external locus of control.
Okay, so 30 seconds to prepare, and then we'll go with someone. Okay, so who would like to go now? This is the last one will be between. Anyone? Okay, then maybe Ariel? Yes, you want to go. Great. So then you can go now.
Okay. The lecture talks about locus of control. And the professor describes two types of this locus of control. First, she explains there are internals, which are people that think that the locus of control comes within one. And she believes that people that are internals work harder, and if they fail, they go hard on themselves, they blame themselves for their failure. The professor explains the other type is externals. These people thinks that external forces are more responsible of their lives, and gives the example of a man that goes to an interview and believe that if it goes well, he's lucky, and if it goes bad, it's because it blames the interviewers.
Okay, awesome, Ariel. Great. I love the way you manage your time. That was perfect. You know, that's another thing, like 20 is a good way to do it. But of course, if you can do the intro in 10 and then take like 25 and 25, it'll help you big time. So nothing to say really. I don't have any comments. Maybe like you forgot that the first example. So like at the beginning, you like the definition you gave was, which is, or that, I don't know, these are people that think that that control comes from within themselves. Now that's good. I think that's enough, you know, instead of saying what you said, which I know that it's hard to leave those kind of things behind, but sometimes it's better to mention the example than explaining more. So you were like, so the professor believes that these people work harder, and if they fail, they're going to blame other people, or they're going to blame themselves, sorry. So instead of giving that explanation, even though it's good, you could have mentioned briefly the example, you know? So maybe that, but I think you're great with time, which is the most, like the main thing here. Grammar, you got it as well. And yeah, nothing to say other than that.
Thank you, teacher.
Okay, guys. So before we go, any questions about the task? You're gonna be practicing tomorrow this with Dre, so that should help you as well. But any questions or comments about the class or what we've seen?
Teacher, can I give this example before we go?
Okay, yeah, we got 2 minutes, so sure.
Yeah, okay. This text is about the two types of locus of control. The lecture gives the example of job interview. Internal, that thinks that all factors depend on oneself, their ability and preparation. The other is external, that is what the person thinks you can control the factor, then you can try your luck. That's all.
Okay, so this time I think you were kind of obsessed with time. You made it in 30 seconds. But there's one thing you were missing. Like, I know you gotta like summarize it, but don't summarize it too much either. So you got 30 more seconds that you could have used to maybe mention the examples or see how those are related to your definitions. So don't hurry up that much. It's okay if you want to make it a bit faster or a bit more summarized, but still it needs a bit of explanation, you know? So, and don't forget to use the transitions as well. So you just went like internal people, this and that. So don't forget to say something like first, according to the professor, internal people believe this. And then don't forget the example, right? So you could say, I like the way you introduced the example at the beginning. You said, the professor provides the example of two people at an interview. Nice. But still, even if you do that, here you need to give some explanation. So what will the internal person do? You could say, for instance, the internal person, I don't know, if she gets the job, she will blame or she will think that she has been prepared. Or if she doesn't get it, she will think that she hasn't worked that hard. And then the same here, you know, she mentions that the external person will think that if she gets the job, it was the interviewer's luck, or it was luck, you know, and if she doesn't get it, it was the interviewer's fault. So still, you need a brief explanation, okay? But I think you're improving with time. You're like, you have the ability to summarize information. So you just have to maybe explain a bit more and don't forget your transitions.
Okay, teacher, thank you.
Okay, guys. So any questions now? All right then. So before you leave, please don't forget to answer the today's survey. Should be there. Okay. Have you all voted? I think someone's missing. Please. Okay, now I get them all. All right, guys. So I'll see you all next class.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, teacher.
Good night, teacher.
Bye, guys.